Hey, Sus.
What's going on, woman?
Uh, I'm talking to you.
Yes, you are. So good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Mm.
What's going on? Tell me about falling in love with piano.
Oh
How
my
old were you?
word.
Was
Well,
that
I kinda
suggested to you, or you just saw one and went,
well, it's very funny because there's the little tiny spinet line and Healy that's still in my basement right now. Um, we got that piano when I was a toddler, and, um, we had it in the house because my mother, played some piano, and there should be music in the house, right?
"Oh,
And apparently, the way that it all began is that if anybody touched the piano, I'd come screaming because it's my piano,
I remember this story.
right? Isn't it a good story?
That's
And so they
great."
called it my remote control. Even if I was outside playing in the backyard, they'd play. Oh,
You'd come
God.
running.
Yeah, and then I was taking lessons with the neighborhood little old lady, Ms. Lauer. She was an older lady, and, I would play, and if I made a mistake, her hands would shake. And I would say I wasn't afraid of her, but I was just kinda, "Miss Laura, could you play it for me, and then I'll play it?" And then she'd play it, and then I could play it, but I wasn't learning to read because I was all ears, you know? And she says, "Oh, this is a problem." God only knew I was gonna become a jazz musician or any kind of musician, actually.
Yeah, it's like,
But
ears are everything, come on.
right, I know, to any musician. So she, says she's not gonna learn to read, she's telling my mom, because her ears are just too good, and that was the best thing. And so that was a funny experience. I remember having a performance, there, and I made a little mistake, but I was okay. Um, let me just see, what else was I gonna tell you about that period of time? Yeah, when we lived in, Marshfield, so this is much later, same piano. I was probably in about 7th grade, and they would play a note on the piano, and I would tell them, what note it was.
Wow.
Um, but here's the thing. They said, "Oh, you have perfect pitch." And I said, "I don't think I do." And they said, "No, you do." I said, "No, I don't." Um, um, I because they play a note, and I had remembered C in my ear.
Oh, wow.
And so I would just count up. Maybe they played an E, I would just count up the scale melodically, and it's, "Oh, that's an E." They go, "Oh my god, you're right." Which, as a musician is just like, that's just what we it's the same thing as looking at something, right? So, but they thought it was a pretty big deal, so that was,
Well, it's a
yeah.
fantastic skill, and it was something they were always trying to teach us in ear training. If you're
Well,
not
that's
born
what's
with it, try to get a good relative pitch so that you can lean on it, and use it.
exactly, because the thing is, people with perfect pitch, the car is driving down the road, the tire squeals, and they know it's a B flat. That's not the same thing as relative pitch that you learn, and that you get taught, But I was just so surprised when I ended up at Berkeley teaching ear training for the first 6 years that I had to teach the people about their inner hearing and singing up notes. I was like, "Wow, this should be natural to do."
I
Uh,
know. I think
yeah,
all of us that didn't think we were gonna be teachers, that were just artists first and had all these, I don't know, skills that we thought were just regular things that most musicians had. You have to figure out how to speak about them and how to teach them step by step because the things that came naturally to us do not come naturally to the masses. It was such a
mm,
shock to me.
yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. And, yeah, that's a remarkable thing, that you learn the longer you stay being an educator. Is
Mhm.
that, you some people can put those skills in stepwise motion and teach somebody how to teach themselves to do it, right?
Mm.
There's some people, that are artists, but they can't make that jump to being teachers. They're not very good teachers. They don't know how to express what it is that they're doing or how they got there. For me, it's always been I think very organized, and I've always been able to kind of say this and that and this. You need that and this, and
Oh, good.
it hasn't been the kind of thing. It took time. Obviously, I'm a much better teacher every year. That never stops.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have studied with people as a younger person, who didn't know how to put it into words, but who played great. And that
Wow.
happens sometimes.
Oh, that still happens everywhere. Yeah, that's very common. More
Mm.
common than not, I think. But how old were you when you heard of Berkeley, and how did that come
I
about?
heard of Berkeley, let's see here. Uh, must've been when I was either a freshman or a sophomore in high school, because I was in the jazz band and we went to the Berkeley High School Jazz Band Festival every year.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, so it was so funny to, end up being, an adjudicator years later. Yeah, so I'd known about it, so I knew, it was never a question where I was gonna go to school.
Hmm.
And, so when I was 18, when I went on the road with this band, it was about 9 months into it, and my mother said, "Alright, you wanna do this music thing, you gotta get educated."
Oh, wow.
So, the band wasn't very good, so it wasn't giving me the education I needed. So this music thing, right? I don't know if that's me saying how, like, or if she said it, I don't know. And, so I came home and, went to Berkeley. Yeah,
But
lived in
were
Quincy.
those early lessons classical?
Oh, let me
They were
just see
just
here. No, no, I've never taken classical piano lessons, no.
they were just here's the piano, this is how you read, here this is how you make chords, this is harmony.
Yeah, because the thing was also, that when I was in high school, um, mom took me to New England Conservatory, right,
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
get piano lessons because, I was starting to get serious. I was playing all the time,
Wow.
and so she wanted me to get a real teacher. And then so I had 2 different teachers while I was studying there. I remember they took me in, I was about in 10th grade, and they took me into a class just to show me around the place a little bit,
Hmm.
and they made me play in front of them, and I was so nervous. I remember I played bot no, I played, When Sunny Gets Blue, or Body and Soul, I don't remember anymore.
That's
And
awesome.
then, they signed me up with Rand Blake. Do you know who Rand Blake is?
I've heard the name.
Yeah, he's creative, and he's big on ear training, which was cool. But he doesn't know how to teach somebody to play the instrument. And the reason I wanted to go there is because I wanted to be able to play the instrument.
Mhm.
And then I switched to Andy Wasserman. I would go to his place in Brookline, my friend Hillary. Do you remember me talking about my friend, high school friend Hillary?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I just talked to her a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, good.
She my mom said, "You have to take Hillary with you the first time to make sure everything's okay." And Hillary's like, "Yeah, so he can kill both of us." It was funny, funny. So I knew I was gonna go, but I did get those good lessons, from him before that. I learned how to practice journaling, which I teach people to do now.
Oh, cool.
And,
About
yeah,
your practice routine and what you're working
practice
on and
exactly, writing it down,
wow,
but writing it down, with details.
yeah,
Details like,
what you're working
what's
on.
the yeah, what the metronome marking is, and also the journaling part is helpful because you can say, having a good time with this. This is really starting to feel under my hands, but I'm going to ask my teacher next week or my friend or whatever, whoever,
Yeah.
um, how do I finger this? I cannot find a good fingering for this. And,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, it's neat. To me, it was really helpful, and a lot of people find it helpful.
Yeah, I find it helpful to practice with the right fingering right from the start, because I was figuring out some Beatle tunes from my head. And then I thought in that easy song for no one, even though it's in the key of B on piano when Paul's playing it, his bass line does the bum 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 bum. And I thought, I don't want to do what the piano's doing there. I want to do that bass line. So I found the notes and I ran out into the hallway in 921. Is there a piano player here? Could you come in for a second? How would you finger this? And I just practiced it like the way he showed me every single
Uh-huh.
time so that I had that fingering down. And if I had known all my scales on piano, I would have known that. But, it was really helpful to say, nail that little thing and throw that in your piano arrangement.
Well, I'll tell you, people ask me that, some of the Berkeley online, I teach for Berkeley's online school,
Yeah.
and, some of those people are pretty much beginners in some ways, not all of them, or maybe
Mhm.
they're just beginners to piano, but they play another instrument. So if I teach Paul Schmeling's course, that's the Berkeley keyboard method, a lot of times they're like halfway through the week and they've been doing or they got ahead in the assignment with some kind of, fingering, and they'll say, "Hold on," at the lesson, and I say, "It's gonna work better if you do this," and then they have to start over from beginning. So
Yeah.
I think it's worth the time before you get into something to figure out how you're gonna play it, because
Absolutely.
otherwise it's like learning 2 different songs almost.
Yeah. And on guitar, when you're in any kind of position, you can play in 12 keys in every fret, and you can start in any fingering place, right? I could start with my first finger, my second, my third, or my fourth, and every time you look at it, you might do something different. So I remember practicing four-part arpeggios when I was a student at Berkeley, thinking, geez, yesterday I had these down. What's going on today?
Mhm.
Today they don't feel like they're flowing. And it's like, decide which fingerings you want to use for which degree. Now you're okay. Like,
Okay,
oh,
alright.
wow, like,
And the thing about that is people aren't students, I should say, aren't patient enough with themselves. What they really because it takes longer at the beginning. They always wanna I'm like, "Will you slow down?" I don't say it like that. They'll say, "You need to slow down." Yeah, but I mean, I get it, but you have to be patient and you have to be real careful when you're first learning a fingering because I think that when you're first learning something, it's like fertile ground.
mm-hmm.
You make a mistake the first few times, somehow it gets in there,
Oh,
and it's
yeah,
like you gotta do it 10 more times or 20 more times to get it back right. So,
exactly.
it's much smarter to take it slowly at the beginning and really get the
Yeah.
fingerings happening.
This makes me think of like 7,000 things I've been wanting to talk to you about all this because it's like even the band you went on out gigging with, what kind of style of music were they doing?
She was a show band, and top 40. So
Excellent.
I've done a lot of different styles.
Yes, you have.
I'm not saying that the style wasn't very happening, I'm just saying that the band wasn't. Because
Yeah.
when I came home, one of the first things that I did was, get into another band doing the same thing.
Right. Because then I remember you got into some synth things and some electronic keyboards because that's what you had to carry around. And then you were doing some things with sound and different effects. And that was really cool. But then you were also doing like lounge gigs, like solo piano,
Mhm,
so that you were playing melody and chords at the same time, playing arrangements maybe from your head or from the real book, or
mhm,
some of those worked out prior when you would play for different uh, lounges and hotels and
mhm.
places that you just
Well,
needed.
you really have to, I mean, playing at those kind of gigs, you gotta play something that's listenable,
Right.
and I learned that the hard way. Um
Things you want to recognize.
Yeah, they wanna recognize the song, they wanna be able to maybe have a memory with it, they wanna be able to ask you to play a song that they know, and bring that melody out, and, it's tricky because, being, a keyboardist, like in those pop or the rock bands, just about sometimes it would be a triad here on this keyboard and maybe something playing a string line up here. So that's one thing, or sometimes there's chords and chords with the 2 hands.
Right.
The bass player also played saxophone, so sometimes he would play saxophone and I would walk a bass line with my left hand and play
Right.
chords with my right hand. Sometimes it would be on all that would all be on the piano sound down here.
Right.
So just right there, we have 3 textures, right? We have the texture of the bass and the chord. We have the texture of the chord and the chord, or the chord and the melody. And then,
Exactly.
of course, there's always bass and melody,
Yeah.
improvisation. Okay, so that's the kind of stuff I would do in the bands, that, I use the, keyboards for, or the, the pop rock bands.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd have to, get a good organ sound, a good when I was on the road, we were carrying my Rhodes,
Oh my God.
a
That's a
suitcase
heavy
Rhodes.
keyboard. Yeah.
Yeah.
You couldn't
And,
manage that
uh,
yourself, right? They always had to have somebody on the other side of it.
yeah, 2 of us, yeah. I was
Yeah.
pretty muscular back then.
But it's very interesting on how piano or keyboards or guitar can function in a band. It's almost infinite ways
Mhm,
because both instruments are so versatile. And
mhm,
like you say, all those different ways to accompany what's around you and or play by yourself. Like I think to some degree, guitar players and piano players are almost neglected in a sense because we're such virtuosos that we don't get as much band experience as a drummer or a bass player. Like they
Mhm.
have to integrate with other people right away. I'm
Mhm.
so used to doing my own thing, and Berkeley made you jump through so many circus hoops that you could play chords, bass, and melody at the same time.
Mhm.
And very few guitar players do that.
Mhm.
Uh, that, I had like John Medham and Jeff Song say to me, okay, well, you're doing the bass and the drums. What do you need us for? What do you want us to do? Like, can you calm it down? Like, because I would write guitar parts to sing over that sounded like complete piano arrangements, like a blanket that went
Mhm.
around the melody. And they'd be like, but
Mhm.
that you've got everything in there. So like, you don't even need us on the song. And I say, you wouldn't say that to Elton John or to Tori Amos or to,
Mhm.
like if it was a piano, you'd know what to do. So like, just find something that fits this.
Mhm.
They'd want me to like simplify it down to like basic chords so I could just stand there and sing. And it's like, no, I want to play that little line that just happened in between my verses, you know? So
Hmm. Mhm.
it
So
was
wait a
wild.
second, I know John's a drummer. Are you talking about a bass player? I don't
Yeah.
know the other guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's bass.
Well, that's weird.
Yeah. It was funny to hear that. And then the whole style thing is wild. I've had a couple of people say to me, well, what style of music are you writing? Like, what is this? Because people are taught, like, play a Latin, play swing. Like, it's like you can accompany it, in any way. But
Mhm.
it's like for an original tune, if it's a combination of styles, some people get completely thrown off. And it's like, well, that's what pop rock is. It's a merging of all the styles in a way. But I've never consciously said, let me merge all the styles and see what I can come up with. It's
Mhm.
just my influences sort of take me in those directions. And I like taking my ear by surprise so that it's not typical where my chords are going to go and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But I never thought about the groove and what style is it. It was like, I don't know. It's like a
Yeah,
James
I think
Tailory thing. Like,
it just seems that the more you play your music and as it develops, I think that that style, because when you're like have to say what your style is, it's awful hard to pick one because you're always, I mean, you're certainly affected by every music you ever heard and performed. And if
exactly.
you compose something, it's like, well, what's this like? Or with in particular, I think that as I studied jazz, you would sound your improvisations might sound similar to so and so who you've been listening to,
Hmm.
or another person, and you're supposed to try to find your own voice, of course, and your own voice is shaped by others. And then you want to try to do something to it a little bit more personal.
Mm.
And it's interesting because part of that comes from actually finding your own in jazz, your own vocabulary that's going to
Mm.
be influenced by different people, but that ends up being your vocabulary. And you might do some repetition of that in your improvisation. And it's just funny that we should talk about this because I was talking to Stephanie Tiernan this morning and she was talking about seeing Bill Evans at the jazz workshop in the 70s, which
Hmm.
is, for all of you listening, way before my time. And, yeah, it's that time. But, and she was surprised that she knew a lot of his recordings. She was surprised at how much of it was the same.
Nice.
Or maybe put same kind of phrase or same phrase, but maybe put on this beat or on that chord. It's interesting, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
if you listen to any particular improviser long enough, you hear how they repeat themselves. Mick
yeah,
Goodrick used to
totally.
say, you know, that's their beef stew,
Mhm,
which is a lovely thing.
mhm.
It's like any other style of playing or whatever. I don't know. But I think it's very interesting when people get all hung up trying to find their own voice as a writer or an improviser because it's like you already have your own fingertips, your fingerprints. You already have your own DNA makeup. You already are so unique in the universe. You've got that part built in. What you have to learn how to do is play this instrument or understand some of the things that you're doing. So just imagine being a newborn baby growing up under a rock and nobody's ever spoken a word to you. How much English do you think you're going to learn?
Mhm.
How much you can understand? Will you be able to learn how to think? Will you even be able to walk? Will you even know to do that? It's like everything is learned.
Mhm.
Everything is from everybody else. It's like
Mhm.
you don't have to worry. Just you have to learn how to talk and think and understand a language, and then you can use it and say what you want. That's the
Mhm.
whole point. And
Mhm.
I don't even mean that you have to understand everything about music theory and harmony before you can write songs. That's
Mhm.
not what I mean at all, because to me, writing songs, anybody can do that. Like anybody can compose a melody or think of something to
Mhm.
whistle or whatever. You don't have to know that that was in the key of D flat and it had a two minor in it and it went to the 4/7. It doesn't have to, you don't have to know any of that, because like a painter probably doesn't know what chemistry is happening in each one of those colors. Let's see,
Mhm.
it was 52% magenta yesterday, so Nina, 37%. Like it's just, nobody's thinking like that. They're just looking at those colors and saying, oh,
Mhm.
that would look so good together. And what if I blended a little of these two together? Or I want to make it a little lighter. And that's what I do with chords and with melody. My ear just wants to go somewhere because I'm trying to feel something from a specific chord or place. And I just write everything I've ever written, unless it was an assignment for school when I was a student, was just put your fingers anywhere and find what you like.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yeah,
how do you compose?
yeah, I think it's the same kind of thing. Being an improviser, which I think any composer really is in some ways.
Yeah,
But I'm kind of, as a jazz player and a jazz improviser, and I mean, shoot, when you're comping in any style, it's rhythmic improvisation,
yeah.
so in many ways. Um, but I'll play and I'll play, and then something kind of gets my ear. So hold on, like, come over here. Let me see this.
Come over here. Or I look down and go, what did you just
Yeah,
do?
right, right, right. Say, tell me that again.
What
Let me hear what
did you
tell me
say?
tell me tell me more about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, and I go there, and then, and then
Uh,
go there again, I'll go someplace else, and then sometimes you just know. There's just that moment, you just know, and you write it down or you record it, right?
yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah.
so I think you've told me about how sometimes you run a, a tape recorder, right, a recorder when you're just doodling even, because you come up with ideas that you don't wanna lose because you can, because it comes from a different part, even
Yes.
if it is, I mean, of the brain or a side of the brain or any other thing that you might think when the muse comes in the room, it's a certain part of the brain that you don't necessarily live in 24/7. That's not the same part of the brain that writes the checks out for the gas company, right? Yeah, it's a different part of the brain, so it's easy to if you lose it and maybe the phone rings, you gotta pick it up, you go back, it's just not it could not be there anymore, and if you rediscover it, you might not know that that was the same thing. That's the extent to which it's just at a different part of the brain. That's my experience. That's why I really like to, not be disturbed when I'm working on something like that,
Absolutely.
and, certainly, you
Turn
know,
off the
work
phone.
with a recorder or something as such.
When did
Uh,
you write your first composition?
oh my god, my first.
How old were you when you realized you were making stuff up?
Well, certainly somewhere around 4th grade, maybe? I think it was in Georgia. So,
So like 9 years old.
yeah,
That's
probably,
awesome.
yeah. I,
I know, I was 10.
yeah, I mean, I don't think it was interesting to me what they were teaching me in the piano lessons, right? I remember looking at this page and it's like, boom, boom, Auld Lang Syne or all sorts of silly. I don't know, because they weren't classical lessons like legit sit down, play a
Hmm,
certain way. You're gonna play. I'm sorry I didn't have that background, frankly. Um,
hmm.
but I got something else that I'm not sorry about. It would have been nice to have both. That's all I'm saying. And my mom tried to get me both, but they ended up sending me to teachers that didn't think of that. So
Huh.
that so we tried.
I
And
remember.
how
Do you
much
remember? Go ahead.
you go? There you go.
Do you remember how we first met? I was trying to remember how we first met. I thought it was just mutual friend, and you were still a student, and I was a teacher.
Yeah, yeah, I weren't this was we probably already knew each other when we were doing Kate Finn's recital, remember that?
Yeah,
Recital?
yeah.
And I didn't know why we had to rehearse so much.
You jazzer.
Oh, I know, it was funny. Why do we have to do it again?
But what I remember loving was how in love with jazz you were,
Mm,
because you were the first person around my age, even though you were a bunch of years younger. You weren't one of my teachers,
mhm,
and you weren't one of the jazz Nazis that were at Berkeley at that time that were really offensive to
mhm,
women and to anybody who liked anything other than jazz.
mhm,
And you really loved jazz. And I remember being so curious about that. It's like, how could you be close to my age and actually like jazz? Like, what do you like about it? And
mhm,
we might have spoken about it at the time, but I'd watch you play and see how much you loved it. And then when we did talk about things, I saw how much you loved it without hating what I was doing. Like
mhm,
you actually enjoyed some of my songs. It was like, no, jazz doesn't like this. Jazz doesn't like James Taylor. Jazz puts down the Beatles. Jazz,
mhm,
like that's what I was around. And you were like one of the first people that were like, no, I really love this and this is why. And
mhm,
it was so cool to see and hear and feel jazz through your ears, through your eyes. It opened me up to understand parts of it that I still think are super cool today.
mhm,
I love
mhm.
about it.
Well, I always respected how well you played the instrument and how much you knew about the instrument,
Mm.
you know? And, your creative output, there's so much of it. And, yeah, and your lyrics and everything, there's just so much to it. And, I had played in pop rock bands and show bands, and so I had a lot of I still listen to some rock tunes,
Yeah.
Um, it depends on why I'm listening. If I'm listening for emotional reasons,
Hmm.
I probably 75% of the time will, go to something with lyrics that sang,
Yeah.
then the time that when I'm working, it's different styles, it's
Yeah.
usually jazz, so
I know, like when you're listening or needing to listen to something, it's like I have to say to myself, am I trying to be fed right now? Well, then I better go to something tried and true, like something that I know really touches me no matter what mood I'm in.
Mhm,
But when I'm exploring music, I have to be in a very playful, it doesn't matter what it is kind of place because there's so much now.
mhm,
Like before, I think we, in a incorrect way, thought we had a handle on what was going on, you know. But I think it's because we only had limited radio stations and
mhm,
friends who knew whatever albums were out at the time or artists that each of us were listening to. It was like easy sort of to keep track of stuff. Now you realize how gigantic the world is because it's all out there.
mhm. Yeah, it's remarkable. I feel like a fossil when I tell the students this, but I said, things were on the reels at the library, and we used to bring our Walkmans in and steal the recordings and hook them up.
Well, they had them set up on the desks, the tables made exactly for that. The reel-to-reels were built into the tables, and they had the little RCA cables coming out the back so that they wanted you to record them and
Oh,
listen
they
to
did? I thought I was getting I'm glad because I
them.
felt always
No,
felt
no,
bad.
that was educational purposes, and it was like, this is how you hear what's going on because there's so much music out there that happened before you and
Mhm,
before the Beatles, and we want you to know about all these different artists. And those were some of the assignments even. We'd
mhm,
bring in that
yeah.
big cassette deck that I had and put it on the table and make our little recordings from there and learn and listen to the greats. And that's what I found was so beautiful, though, no matter what style of music any of us grew up listening to, at least when I was a kid, all styles were on the radio stations at the same time.
Mhm,
And at Berkeley, certainly there was a lot of extra new people to listen to, but there wasn't that background from like my guitar teacher about any hierarchy or
mhm,
harassment for any other style other than jazz. It was just like, just listen to great people play, listen to great musicians.
mhm,
And I've always liked when people say I'm a musician's musician. Like I don't mind that.
Mhm.
But I like great musicianship. I hear some development. I want to hear some melody. I want to hear harmony. I want to hear some counterpoint. I want to hear something interesting that keeps my ears
Mhm.
engaged, and I want to feel something. So, I can jump around and pretend to dance to the best groovy things that don't do that. But that's just having fun. It's not being fed or
Mhm.
being moved by some new piece of music.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it was just, I remember that, when I was studying with Dave Holland at NEC, and he would assign some songs to me, and he would say, "You have to listen to at least 3 different versions of this," you
I like
know?
that.
So I like to tell my students to do that too, and I also remind them that it is so easy to do that right now. Well, you just go to YouTube or anybody's website, and you can listen to 10 of them,
Mhm.
it takes you, like, 2 seconds to do it compared to schlepping to the library, getting your stuff out, hooking it
Yep.
up, blah, 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 you know?
Dedication.
Yeah, so that is just so much better now. Music education is just so much advanced.
I
I
know,
think.
but I'm amazed at how many people still ask me how to do something or where to find it. It's like I gave you all those handouts. You
Mhm,
have it in the book that you were supposed to buy. It's
mhm,
on the internet. It's not Berkeley exclusive. It's like this is just guitar knowledge. The whole world has that out on the internet for
mhm,
free, and
mhm.
you can find it. It's like they don't even think to Google it. It's like I thought that was the joke. You could Google anything,
Well, you
and
kinda can.
I know. So why aren't you?
Right.
It's like, where do I find this?
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Well, the other thing is too, I'll have somebody come to my private lesson at Berkeley in person, and, well, relatively accomplished players. Maybe they studied classical for even quite some time, so they know a lot about, music, and then no trouble with the scales or the arpeggios and anything that's written, they can play pretty well, and they said, "Well, I wanna learn how to play jazz." I said, "Okay, well, you came to the right place." First thing I say, and I say, "Name me 3 of your favorite jazz pianists." And they, "Oh, I don't know." Right.
but you should be able to teach them jazz in one lesson.
Right. For 1 semester
Yeah.
or 1 lifetime.
Yeah, one lifetime. I had a
Yeah.
student actually come in to me once and say, okay, here's one thing I don't want to study. I don't want to learn how to, I'm not interested in the abyss known as improvisation. I was like, I got you, I understand. Eric Clapton used to only work on tape, before Pro Tools and all those digital things came into being. And he would always record like 5 to 16 different guitar solos, and they'd be up on the faders on all these different tracks. And he'd sit there with the engineer and the producer, and they'd take the best moments of each of his solos and
Mm,
make the best solo,
mhm,
like comping it the way you comp a vocal. And then
mhm,
he'd go home with a cassette to learn that solo so that he
mhm,
could come back and play it with conviction. Because at
mhm,
that point, then he's got the exact fingering he wants, and he knows exactly where that pre-bend should be, and all those beautiful subtleties that go into the expression and the articulation and the actual speaking or singing what he wants. And I loved that. So in all the DAWs now, all the digital audio workstation, computer-based recording setups, we can put like a loop around the section that you want to put a part in if you're learning what those chords are or if you're wanting to solo over it or whatever. And I just keep playing. I get the right guitar and the right sound I want and set up the mic on the amp and do whatever I want with effects. And then
mhm,
I just say, okay, go, see what happens. Because I've been hearing the song. I wrote the song. I know by ear where it's supposed to go, but I still make mistakes. And I just see where it's going to go, what I wish I could play. I sing something, I find it, I try things. I might record, you know, 56 different versions, you know, and I like 2 seconds of each. or, or
mhm.
or three measures or those four bars. Oh my God, you ended it beautifully. Keep that. And sometimes it's keep it and sometimes it's comp it the way Clapton did and then learn it and play it with conviction. So it's a
Mhm,
composed, improvised, right
mhm.
off your
Well,
ears.
now that's interesting, right?
That's the
That's
fun
another
thing to do. And there's
yeah,
no
that's
right or wrong
another
at that point because I
yeah,
can get rid of the
yeah.
And I get more than one
Mm,
chance.
yeah, the thing that's just another way to do it, right? Because we've got the purely improvised, we've got the written solo, but how do you come up with the written solo? You improvised and then you put the good stuff together and, which is a composition too, but it's
Exactly.
happening during the solo. I mean, that's because we were talking about how you compose, and I was talking about improvising at the instrument to find it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
And
the
it's
same kind of thing.
Cheryl Bailey just asked me a couple of years ago to contribute to the new Berkeley Guitar Department book. And she said, "Why don't you write an etude on
Mhm,
George Harrison's chords to something? Just write a melody
mhm,
and then tell us what scales you used to write it." And I
mhm,
laughed because I knew I wasn't going to use any scales to write it.
mhm,
But I knew I had to stay away from the melody. I had to
mhm,
stay away from the bass line because it's super melodic. And I had to stay away from the guitar solo because it's super melodic. And I
mhm,
wrote this thing by ear and I notated it down. And then I actually said in the description that I didn't use any scales because I'm really just going by how something feels and how I want it to sound. And it just turns out that those frequencies are automatically correct. You
mhm,
know, those intervals do work and those tensions do work. It's like the artist picking the colors, even though he doesn't know that it was 50%, cobalt or whatever. It's
mhm,
like, it's okay. And those scales do make sense, but it's like almost like another way of going to the same place,
mhm,
however your brain works or how that stuff makes sense.
mhm,
So it's funny. I mean, they can't say in the book it's these changes, but somebody who knows the song might know.
mhm.
And then I like that it just stayed away from those other three melodies that were so catchy, and there was something else that I could put in there.
Wow, yeah. I had to write a number of short pieces based on various scales. I wrote a book called A Modern Method to Piano Scales. It's my recent
Nice.
one. And
A
so
lot of books for Berkeley.
just two. Mm,
Really?
yeah. I
They're
mean,
massively packed with good stuff, though.
oh yeah, I hope so. Thank you.
Sounds like a lot to me.
And yeah, so I thought you might be interested in the book because the fingerings are there for the scales, by the way. So I go through the major scales, major pentatonic, minor pentatonic, blues, major blues, minor blues, all the modes to the major, all the modes to the harmonic minor, harmonic major, all the modes to the melodic, jazz melodic, um, chromatic, whole tone, symmetric augmented, symmetric diminished, symmetric dominant. Oh my God. I can't believe I named all of them. But there's some fingerings to that stuff and then once you get the hang of it, but what kind of connected me to that was just that what I wanted to do was say, okay, I always like to have theory in my books and then musical application. So I tried to write something musical, using that scale. So that's a little bit different because I'm being, brainy about it. I got to make sure that I don't use something that I shouldn't. I didn't always succeed because I just heard something that said this should be there, you know. And there was one song in particular. Um, it's a tune. It's based on kind of the vibe of Chameleon by Herbie Hancock. And I just changed the key. It's just a vamp, just like Herbie's tune is two chords. And so I made mine up a whole step and just the two, it's just a C minor seven and an F7. And you know, sometimes there'll be a note that wouldn't be within the exact, chord, but it's something that I've talked about with friends is that when something happens musically naturally and it sounds good, don't blank with it, because it's not within the scale. That's why if somebody gives me an assignment and it's not there, so what I said, well, that's not using Dorian, but that's an awful nice scale. But oh no, piece, melody or something, not scale, but that's an awful nice melody,
Yeah.
but just for my sake, what note are you missing for the Dorian? Right.
Right,
Oh,
right.
that's right. Natural six. There you
Yeah.
all right, but I like what you wrote. And so the funny thing was too, because the course Scales 101 that Berkeley Online, I wrote for Berkeley Online, um, I was complaining to a friend of mine. I said, it's hard to give improvised examples only using a particular scale. Again, because the scale's over here, my improv is over here. And I'm having a hard time with this because I keep playing notes that I shouldn't. And if I try to only use those notes, my intellect gets in the way. And so all the vibe is out of it. It's like a terrible solo. So, so what I came to understand that I need to do is just play. And I'll notice what I played, or what came out, and I'll always notice, oh, okay, that was a flat six, okay, and then I'll bring it up when I talk about it. Say, look, this was mainly C Dorian, but
Mhm.
you'll notice that sometimes I did the A flat, and that A flat sounds like
Sounds
this,
cool.
and it goes down. So anyway, that's an interesting thing too about
Yeah.
examples and your mind getting in the way and the different parts of the brain, and yeah.
But what I think balked against was the harassment, the hatred, and the insistence of this is how it's learned, and they just throw you in 11 feet deep water and laugh at you, and then say record that solo in the front of the class, and then go home and transcribe it. And you're realizing, oh, of course it sounds bad. I played a C sharp on a C chord. It's like they're like pointing out why you're so it's like you have no training with it at all, but they're expecting you to just all of a sudden get it. Like there was not really any stepwise training to say this is how it's done. It was just improvise on this, improvise on that, do
Mm,
this. In fact, taking harmonic considerations for improv was so exciting because every week they'd put the transcription up of a beautiful solo, and you thought, this is it.
mhm,
This is the week the magic's going to happen. Then they're going to show us what really goes into it and why and how to do it. And you'd be going in to get your seat, and this fantastic song would be on with this great solo, and you couldn't wait. And then it would be like, the flat three resolves to the 5/6, which goes down to the third, which you come up the arpeggio in thirds, and then we go down in a triplet to the dot. And you're like, kill me now. Like it was never the magic side of what you were looking for. And
mm,
then you'd say, well, how did Ella Fitzgerald really learn? How did Joe Pass really learn? These folks knew nothing. Uh, who else? George Benson. They knew nothing. And
mm,
yet they knew this delicious, wonderful language that just, all these great things are coming out. In fact, that reminds me of a joke that I just saw with a State Farm commercial. They're like, oh, there's too many options. It's really complicated, like jazz. Did
I think I saw that
you see
commercial.
that? It was a
Yeah.
pretty funny commercial. But what I realized was, Ella Fitzgerald, George Benson, Joe Pass, they didn't get thrown in at Berkeley on day one, having never sung before or never played jazz before in 11 feet of water. It's not like they've been hearing it. They've been listening to people. They've got the vocabulary and the language and the feel for it and the love for it that you have. And then they're putting that all together. It's like when you know where the progression is going, I can sing the greatest solos on jazz standards because I've heard those progressions come through the walls now for 40 years.
Mhm,
Now I know those songs. When I was 20 or 18, I didn't know where those chords were going. It was
mhm,
your guess is as good as mine where my fingers are going to go because I don't know where that song's going. So I went, aha. See,
mhm,
Ella would not get on stage tonight in front of 60,000 people and sing a solo on the song of mine that she doesn't know.
mhm,
They
mhm,
never told you that you're playing songs you don't know, and we
mhm,
want you to go home and learn them. And then they'd say, don't learn your solos. You're like, like it was very confusing. And but she would never perform on a song that she didn't know, or if they changed chords on her, and made her look bad, oh baby, that would have been the end of it,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
So that was very interesting to understand.
mhm, mhm,
It's a big difference.
mhm,
So when people could hear stuff, but they didn't know what it was called, but they were playing it, somebody could tell them, well, that's just a C minor 7 flat 5, you'll get it. You're like, oh yeah, I played it all the time. But George Benson didn't know what it was called, you know?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, when you get the gospel players who have this great harmonic sense, and sometimes when they come to Berkeley, they have no idea what they're playing, but they sound incredible. Okay. And I told them, you already did the hard part. You're already playing the music. You're playing it in a way through your heart that I can't teach you. I can teach you, I can say, that's a 9 on that chord. That's E flat major 7. Check that out. Let's do some inversions, which is very boring compared to how they play. Just take those 15 minutes and go through 12 keys and try to play even just a triad, you know, and try to get to know it and understand it. And slowly the vocabulary of the words begin to describe what you're playing, you know. I mean,
That's cool. See, I've never heard anybody honestly say that either. That's brilliant.
yeah.
That's the hard part. You've already done that, and it's already coming through your heart, and it's in the right place, like with the right conviction, even. You know, like it's like saying the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable. Sometimes people come up with the greatest tensions on specific chords and things, but if you put it in the wrong place, it's not as cool.
Oh,
It could be
totally.
offset, you know, and the melody could be offset or whatever. So, yeah, it's those things that you want to be believable. And that you just put your finger on it. It's like they really can't teach it,
No,
you
no.
know? And people used to
How
always
can
laugh at guitar players and say you can't really teach them how to read either. Because, like,
yeah,
if you want a guitar player to turn down their volume, just put a piece of music in front of
yeah,
them.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And so it's like, well, wait a minute. Well, then how is the whole college based on if you can't really teach reading and you really can't teach improv? How are they taking everybody's money saying they're going to teach them these two things when they don't? And it's like, no, I really did teach people how to learn how to read very well.
Mhm. Like, yeah, I don't think it's something you can't learn how to do or to teach
Yeah,
reading,
yeah. It just
but
depends on who you
I
get, who's willing to really teach you.
uh-huh, right, because it's a pain in the ass for the teacher
All of that stuff is.
listening to it sometimes,
But
but that doesn't mean, you know
you're bringing up something very important, though. It's because, like in any other style of music, or however we found our way into composing or writing songs or whatever we were doing, we had this awakening, some kind of a hey, that's the title of one of your albums. We had this door open somehow that showed us a way into something really magical. And it happened naturally, and a desire was born that we couldn't put down, that we couldn't stop following, that we couldn't stop playing with. And I'm not sure we're seeing folks as hungry these days as we used to see before. Because, like you say, they don't have the patience for it. It's like, that's what playing is. You play it 6,000 times so that you know it really well and can play it in front of 7,000 people without making a mistake. This is
mhm,
how you get great. You have to have repetition. What do you
mhm.
mean you don't want to play it?
I
When am
said,
I going to get good?
oh my, I had a student say to me recently, "Oh, so I have to play that chord here, and then that another chord on beat 3, and then another chord on the following? Is that what you're saying?"
You're giving me an existential crisis.
And I said, "Well, that's the song." I mean,
Yeah.
"What do you mean it's" "Oh, well, then I guess I'll have to practice it." I'm like, "Well, yeah, like Don's."
Boom, boom, bow.
Right? I mean, it's remarkable because it's not
I
gonna
don't get it.
be that the culture, that immediate culture of turning the computer on and being able to Google anything and getting an information or something in 2 seconds. That's why some people are afraid us players are gonna go out of style.
Well, I think we're going to probably be in more demand because it's going to be even more rare that somebody actually really plays an instrument or understands what they're doing.
Mm. Well, I hope so. Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I'm going to still enjoy it as long as I can.
Well, me too, me too. I tend not to think that it's that piano lessons, and guitar lessons. People always wanted to do that. I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah, yeah. And those instruments
That
are
don't
still
end up
cool.
being, I mean, if you don't want to be a professional at it, you like doing it, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Well, how do you write down? It seems like piano is so linear and so fluid. And the way they teach guitar is so like, here's a block of notes. And
Mm,
some of the big chords we learn when we play a bar chord after those first few little open position chords, we don't even realize that those 6 notes are just duplicating notes to make triads. You
mhm,
don't even need all 6 of them, you
mhm,
know? So it's very easy to write down a chord chart on guitar and then expect that most people would play it in pretty much the same place
mhm,
because we know various chord shapes, you know?
mhm.
But when you go to play, like when I write songs on piano now, I'm like, I got to take videos of it and I got to, it's like I could try to write some down, but I remember even speaking to you when I first started messing around with piano in a serious way or writing songs. I was like, it seems to me that what you write in the bass clef should just be your left hand, and everything in the right hand should be the top clef. That would make more sense, you know. But it just really depends on the range, and things
Mhm.
cross over, and there's so many moving parts, and to keep track of 10 fingers, I'm like, oh, this is bizarre. And yet, I have other piano players say to me, "Are you kidding? 6 pianos in a row? Playing chess? You're playing chess on 6 different levels with those 6 rings. I don't know how you do that."
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, no, I can't believe the guitar either, you know? At least, the piano, I can look at it, I can put down the sustain pedal and play,
Yeah.
a million different notes at the same time.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a beautiful thing. I'm
yeah, it is.
I'm just amazed at the size of a piano. I mean, even my upright over there,
Mhm.
it's such a big instrument. And then if you're playing a grand or a baby grand, Kate will say, "Oh, that's like driving the big bus." Like you're
Mhm.
playing this gigantic thing, but the overtones and the harmonics and the richness and the sustain and that reverb. I mean, it's really like a sound bath. It's the most amazing thing.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it was one of the things that threw me off in ear training classes because it's like I could tell you not only, the quality of a chord on a guitar instantly, but I could tell you what inversion it was in and where you were playing it on the neck and all that stuff. And on piano, I'm like, is that
Isn't
major
that
or minor?
interesting?
I don't even know because there was so much information
Yeah,
there.
I ran into that with, when I used to teach ear training full time. Yeah, I
Mm,
also ran into, a kid would come in and he'd say, "I have perfect pitch on trumpet, but when you play it, I said he doesn't know what the note is." And I said to him, "Well, just transpose it down a step and write it down." But it's just not how it worked for him. It was just totally confusing all semester. And another interesting thing happened once that I was playing the upright like that, so the soundboard was facing the class, and, there were a couple of people sometimes that said, "You're playing really loud." Like, they're not used to that kinda, sound with so many overtones and so and so that was interesting too. But, yeah, I think that people that work with the piano when they do ear training really need to be aware of the fact that somebody might not be used to hearing it on that instrument.
that's exactly true. And isn't it fascinating that you could take off the attack of any sound wave of any note played by any instrument, percussive, melodic,
Yeah.
anything? You could take off the attack, that
Mm,
first plosive, and you can't tell what instrument made that sound.
mm. I didn't know that.
The
Mm,
sustain is the same for everything. So it's the attack that gives the articulation, that gives the pronunciation, that gives the understanding of it was a trumpet, it was a piano, it was a guitar, it was a car horn, it was a. I think that's fascinating. And then there was a woman who wrote a book called The Secret Language of Babies
mhm,
because she had perfect pitch. And when
mm,
she had her first son, she noticed that when he cried, the very first sound he made, that first syllable that we're talking about, was different
mm,
depending upon what need he had. She had a
mm,
different sound for when he was hungry. She knew the sound for when he needed to be changed. She knew the sound when he had a gas pain. She just knew what he needed. Pick me up. And she was on Oprah when I heard about this. And she went around to like 7, it's on YouTube, you can watch it. It's like 7 mothers with newborns, however many people were up there. And they all started fidgeting and crying. She said, "This one's hungry, this one needs to be changed, this one, this is," and they all did it, and all those babies were fine. So
mm.
that listening and detail, to me, the magic is in the detail. Whether
Mhm,
you're writing something or thinking through an essay or
mhm,
making a decent lyric or putting together a speech or a class or writing a book or
mhm,
making a great solo in the middle of a tune somewhere. I mean, it's like the details have all the magic in it. That's what makes things so exciting. And here she was picking up on these details, knowing that that's what babies were actually communicating. And it was because it was a reflex. When they're
mhm,
hungry, they go, "Mm, mm," and it's a mouth thing, you know.
mhm.
When it's a pain, it's like, you know, like, and we have the same sounds and reflexes today. Like, we're the same, you know.
Oh gosh,
It's fascinating.
that's amazing. That is amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's though I think the impatience and the immediacy in, the culture, especially of the younger people trying to learn music, if they're not gonna be patient, if they're not gonna take the time, if they're not gonna be excited about learning the details, it ain't gonna happen,
Oh, no.
you know?
How
So,
many years were you studying piano, literally playing and studying piano before you even went to Berkeley?
well, let's see here. Well, am I gonna count Ms. Lauer? I don't know. I mean, those were lessons, but I don't know
Yeah.
how old I was. I was still in Illinois, as I recall. So,
Well, like even experience playing the instrument, like there's nothing that could even replace holding or sitting next to and touching the instrument for years and years and years. Like I can teach myself all kinds of things on piano. You know,
mm,
for a while I was even playing Martha, My Dear, and singing it at the same time. But I had to keep playing it for like 11 years. Otherwise, I'd forget it all. You know, it's like I wish everything I ever learned I could still just instantly play, but it's not like that. You're constantly changing your repertoire,
mm.
constantly putting different things in and out, and you have to relearn things all the time. And it'd be so cool if they were all just right there under your fingers all the time.
Are they on the guitar though?
No, the same on guitar,
Mhm,
you
mhm.
know.
Oh, yeah. So I would say probably I was certainly by 1st grade. So from 1st grade, and then I went to college 2 years after high school.
Wow. So
So,
that's like 12, 14 years.
yeah, it's a lot of time with
But
sound.
that's a serious musician before you went to Berkeley. That's what I thought Berkeley was, the place for serious musicians. I
Well,
couldn't
that's
wait to go
why,
to Berkeley.
it's just, there was a couple of things that were surprising to me,
Hmm.
particularly as it's like, well, of course I know what inner hearing is. You don't hear sounds in your head and say, oh yeah, that's the third or
Right.
whatever. I have, if I listen to music, even if it's just a film score to something, quit listening to the words, I just listening to the music. And, in my mind, I can see it as what the notes are on the keyboard or what the chords are. I was,
Oh, cool.
I'm going to F minor, and all that kind of stuff. And that's part of what being a musician is. It's not, it is cool, but I'm not really special. That's what we do. That's
I
what
know.
happens
It's
for
that's
us.
those are the actual skills of being a
Well,
musician.
and the students are coming in younger and
Yeah.
knowing less,
Yes, 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 I noticed.
particularly the domestic ones. And, um, it's really surprising to me. It's just really surprising to me. I knew exactly what I wanted to do from the moment I got there,
Me too.
and I worked on it, and I continue to work on it. 'Cause it's funny because you said how many years of lessons before Berkeley, and then I was thinking to myself, "I'm taking lessons right now."
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We're
Yeah,
all still studying all kinds of things.
it
You
it
know?
just never stops. It's just never,
No.
that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Um,
There's no bottom. Definitely.
yeah,
I love that about it actually too. But
uh-huh,
there were like a lot of materials that my first guitar teacher gave me. There were little baby chords, melodies, and things like that that you could play on the guitar. And my first 10, 15 years teaching at Berkeley, there was no way I could bring that stuff in for my students. I was playing that stuff when I was 9, 10 years old, 11 years old. That would have been silly. It would have been like giving them Alfred's basic guitar method number one or something, you know? Like they were so far beyond that. And now it's like that stuff's too hard for my 18 to 22-year-olds. I'm like, what is happening? What are we actually teaching here? You
Mhm.
know, it's like we're getting paid to babysit. It's like,
Yeah, it does feel like that sometimes.
it really does. And it's more behavioral and talking and psychological, whatever. And you're like, I just wanted to play guitar. Are you kidding? Come on, let's play. Let's do something, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, it's funny. It's like, a friend of mine told me a story about she was in a class one time and, she so I guess some student was kinda a little acting up and, fucking acting up. But, she goes she threw an eraser at the board and said, "This is why I didn't teach grade school."
Absolutely. Me too. I wanted to teach college level. And this is why I wanted to have these conversation chats with some of my friends and people I would like to meet because I need adult company. I started this purely for myself. I don't expect it to do anything for anybody. It's doing it for me, you know?
Yeah, no kidding. Well, it's interesting to find you have the same experience in your, I'm not putting the people down. So if anybody hears this, I'm not saying anything bad about,
Yeah, it's
you
nobody's fault.
it's nobody's fault and it's not, and if you come to me, I'm happy to take you from where you are. And with your work, you'll get to the next spot and I'll walk with you that way. My only trouble is really with people that aren't willing to do any work.
Exactly. They don't realize that that is the work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, well, like what I just said about that person, just are you even on this planet? I just
And they look at you like you don't know because you're not a rock star. And that's not how people play guitar out in the world. And it's like, well, you're watching some really bad players. You
uh-huh,
know, if you're going to play the instrument, I mean, you could do that theatrical thing, and that's cool for audiences and stuff, but that's not going to get you through this proficiency. And you know what? Since you already know how to do that, you didn't need to come to Berkeley for that.
uh-huh,
What are you coming to Berkeley for if you don't want to learn the actual musician side of that?
uh-huh,
That's
uh-huh.
what I don't get.
Mhm.
They don't
Mm,
really know what Berkeley is all about. They don't know what it entails and what it's going to do. And that's what this new guitar book is trying to say. It's like, you need to know this stuff because this is what we're doing. This is what you learn. This is what everybody on the planet who plays guitar uses
mhm,
to
mm,
some degree or another.
mhm. Well, piano is a little different because, just about everybody has come in with some classical experience as a child.
Hmm.
Not everybody, but most have
Hmm.
some experience at playing the instrument. These days, though, with them letting in more people that I feel shouldn't be let in yet,
Thank you.
they need
Yes,
to
that.
practice for 1 or 2 more years before I mean, when I don't do auditions for the college anymore, but when I used to, it wasn't unusual for me to write down, "This person needs at least 1 to 2 years of lessons." What do they think?
Yes.
They'll play a little something and then they're gonna
Right.
they're gonna sink. They're not gonna swim.
Well,
I'm looking
exactly.
at them,
And aren't they concerned about student retention other than just getting people from all over the world? It's like, let in the people who really want to learn and will
Yeah.
stay here and keep paying you.
Mhm. Yeah, it's, yeah, I mean, yeah.
A lot of crazy moving parts to that. I guess if I was, you know, more on the administration side or something, I'd be like, but we need bodies to do blah, blah, blah. We need to fix the bottom line for blah, blah, blah. And there'd be different parameters to fill or fit or whatever. But for those of us on the front line, I totally agree with you. I would gladly take anybody, even just picking up guitar for the first time. I gave Kenward Denard a 3 hour guitar lesson, and he gave me a 3 hour drum lesson. And he just kept looking at it like, what? Like, what am I going to do with this thing? He was so fun. Uh, but yeah, uh, they had asked us guitar teachers if we'd be interested in just teaching anybody any kind of guitar lesson online. Would you be interested in doing that? Like, it doesn't have to be the Berkeley curriculum if it's through Berkeley. And we said, sure. And then they put it out to the world, like in a survey, who would be interested in taking guitar lessons with Berkeley faculty if it had nothing to do with grades, and it was so overwhelming. They didn't even know what to do with the numbers. And I just thought, there's your answer, like
Mm,
it is very popular. There are people hungry for stuff, and it doesn't have to always be just this way,
mm,
It's
mm.
kind of
Yeah,
kind of
kinda
fun.
making the circle back there to that, right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people want to, I think anybody should have fun with any instrument and enjoy their time on the planet any way they'd like. And
Mm,
anybody can be a real scientist or a real musician or a real scuba diver or whatever they want.
for sure.
But you know, they just have to realize that the reality is that's what the college actually is.
Well, I've said to people, if you want college credit, this is how you get college credit. If you
Yeah.
don't care about getting a degree, why don't you just go and get lessons or
Yeah.
play in a band, you know?
Exactly.
You don't
Yeah.
want more
Totally.
interest, but if you want to get,
Right.
a degree and move forward, and that is the cool thing about the school, though, that we do have to say is that, not everybody wants to be a player.
No, there's so
You
many
know,
things to
you
enjoy
know,
about music, around music.
And, there's lots of different avenues you can go to that I think that being around the school is really good. And also, the networking for the people that you'll be working with and knowing for the rest of your life, such as you and I, right?
That's pretty cool, yeah. So when you're writing something, I remember when we were doing one of your albums recently, you did have some charts, you did have some things written down, but how much of that did you change while you were reading it or reminding yourself what you wanted to do there? And how much
I'd
was
say,
actually
well,
written?
the first thing to say about that, it's never written in a grand staff.
Or exact?
Right.
Okay,
They're
because I
like lead,
find that really hard.
yeah, they're like lead sheets. And then I also sometimes it's really funny because I write some very intricate arrangements of things.
Yeah,
I
yeah, you do.
on sophisticated lady, right?
Yeah.
For my class, upper structure triad level 2, I have it notated with the left hand in the grand staff,
Wow.
so they can see the whole thing because they're like, yeah, but what do I do with this?
Yeah.
What I see is just an upper structure triad, horizontal line, primary chord, melody.
Wow.
A lot of it is played very similar, but, I don't change the sonorities when I play because it's an arrangement, you
The
know?
sonority, you mean
The
which chord is where?
Yeah, like excuse me, what chord I'm playing.
Because there's
Yeah.
you're gonna change the voicings though, or do you have specific voicings for
Well, it
certain?
depends. If I'm playing something with a particular melody being harmonized with a triad, I won't change it.
Yeah.
Yes, AJ, what? That pisses you off?
I get very attached to specific voicings, and
Mhm.
that has actually helped me in a lot of ways because
Yeah, well, absolutely. Hold on, let me grab him. Hey, young man, come on. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, I'm talking
I
to
know my guys start coming over after, "Oh, look at him. How cute you are on TV."
Isn't he a guy?
He's
Um,
so sweet.
yeah, so, it's really funny. I should scan something and send it to you because before I write it all down in the grand staff,
Mm,
and I don't even mind doing it for myself because if I put it away for 3, 4 months, I have to kinda make it up again,
I know, or
you know?
listen to the recording and transcribe your own stuff, which is
Which
a
is
waste
ridiculous.
of
So
time.
right, so
Absolutely.
what I write and some of them with the single line, I'll write, so since the melody is already there, I
Mhm.
have to invert the upper structure triad until the melody note is on top.
Oh, there you go. It's like, was it this? This? Oh, of course it had to be that.
Right, so that's given. But what do I do with my left hand? Or do
Mhm.
I add anything else in my right hand? And what I'll write is with a pencil right underneath, I'll write 1 7 1 3 7 3 7 7 3.
Mm. Get your quick
No,
inversion.
Yeah, just so I know, what kind of shell or guide tone or three-part chord or cluster. If it's cluster, I stick with numbers. If it's
Nice.
easy on the lead sheet to write the notes, I'll write the notes, but sometimes it's harder to see and
Right?
yeah, and,
Mhm.
that, I mean, it's for me at this point, obviously, it's just as easy to read the grand staff, but that shorthand is very helpful to me,
Definitely. That sounds great.
and,
That makes sense.
it depends on what your real goals are, I'm not what if a student like well, for instance, let's say 1/7 is ED, right?
Yeah.
I don't write ED, right? And I wouldn't let my students do that either. They have to understand that that's the root in the 7th. I
Okay.
think that's more important to know.
Well, it also
Looks good.
determines distance,
Yeah,
which
so
is important. You need that interval relationship understood or
right, it's not like DE.
yeah, that would be like, it doesn't work.
But yeah, it's interesting, yeah.
It is. I guess I'm just fascinated with the whole where does it come from? How do we hear it? And why does it come to us? And then how do we remember it? And what do we do with it? And uh, it's just so cool that, you know, before you've written something, it doesn't exist. And then afterwards, it's like, here's this new thing that wasn't here before.
Mhm.
And the other day, I was driving and I thought, what if we keep coming back to the planet and we get to be a human being again and we keep being musicians and we keep writing the same songs? And that's what we're actually doing when we go, wait, there's one coming in. We're actually trying to remember what we did in that previous lifetime and we just keep remembering those same songs.
Oh, that's too funny.
It's like, I don't know.
'Cause I just I mean, to me, I really imagine the muse. I just,
I like that muse thing
uh,
a lot.
just some
Well, to me, it's like the same energy that creates worlds.
yeah,
Whatever the
exactly.
magic and love and real life source energy muse that keeps everything breathing and alive is, whatever that is,
That is that thoughtless space.
it's this, you know. And what you were saying earlier about repetition and having to do things over and over again, I had a student who was an actual biology major who explained to me that every time you learn something new, your brain creates a new groove to start that synapse connection. So
Mm,
if you've ever seen a picture of a brain with all the little roads in it and stuff, like a
mhm,
calf's brain in the store or something, there's
mhm,
all those crevices. And
mhm,
every time you try to play that interval or that scale or
mhm,
that chord to this chord to that chord in the same measure,
mhm,
you're creating a new synapse connection to teach your brain to tell your muscles and your tendons and your fingers how to do the thing. And no matter how much somebody thinks it's about their cool mustache or the latest hat or haircut they're wearing, it's like there's a physicalness to every instrument
mhm,
and your body is just not doing it yet. It's like
mhm,
every time I play piano in front of you or some of my other piano player friends, they'll go, well, make your hands more like this. And
mhm,
that's the same one people playing guitar in front of me. I go, well, make this hand do it. It's not there yet. We haven't put in our 10,000 hours yet.
mhm,
But as soon as you do, you get that aha moment and everything feels like, I get it now. And
mhm,
that particular phrase or that scale or that particular chord passage is playable. And you will not forget it usually. It
mhm,
won't be that hard to tell yourself what that was again because your fingers are used to doing it and they're now trained and they've got it. But
mhm,
you're not going to feel like you have it until you've done it enough times that that connection is made.
mhm. Well,
And
that's why it's
I
so
love knowing that because that's like just means just keep showing up and
uh,
giving it sun and water and it's going to grow,
yeah,
you know.
exactly. Well, but that's exactly what I mean about fertile ground
That's
because
what I wanted
you
to
want
come back to it for because I wanted to add
yeah.
that to that fertile ground.
Very good. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
with you on that because, because you just created a groove that's wrong.
Yeah. And yeah, it takes much more to undo a groove that's wrong than to just do it right correctly from the
Yeah.
first.
That's the way that it is. That's the way that it is. You hear him? Can you hear him panting?
Yes, yes.
Shut your mouth, you little, you noisy. Are you being noisy? His leg was hurting him yesterday, but he's better today.
Oh,
Did
that's
I tell
good.
you that already?
You did, yeah.
It was terrible.
What do you do to stay inspired, or how often do you write, or how often do you still practice, or any of those things?
Well, I practice 2 to 3 hours every day,
There you go.
and that's just piano playing. That's not transcribing or writing or,
Yeah.
you know, I stay inspired by the recordings I listen to, by learning new songs from recordings and from transcribing solos. I'm inspired, now by a friend of mine who, is a new faculty member at Berkeley, and we got hooked up together for me to teach her jazz harmony, and,
Hmm.
we started hanging out this summer, and I said, "Hey, look, if this faculty thing isn't," you know how you study with another faculty? We weren't sure it was when or if it was gonna happen, so I said, "Why don't you just come over? We'll switch lessons."
Mm-hmm.
Teaches me, classical technique,
Oh, cool.
classical pieces, and I teach her jazz harmony, and that's been really inspiring.
I
Very
love that.
it's funny 'cause, you would think that somebody who's been at it for so long, but I'm doing a new technique. Yes,
Oh, yeah.
it's very exciting, yeah.
Yeah, that would
And
be
it's
if I
very
went to a different style, like all of a sudden doing flamenco or something, a whole different thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing, and I'll watch her play some classical pieces and mark it up on my new iPad with the iPencil and circle things in red and in blue.
That's great.
Yeah, right now, so these are the things that I find inspiring, and then of course going to concerts, and
Mm.
I booked myself a cabin on the jazz cruise. It's a cruise that's like every night they have jazz and like the famous guys,
Oh, wow.
and that goes out of Miami and it's a week long and it also goes to 3 islands too. Islands will be
Oh,
fun, but
cool.
that's not what, and they give talks during the day. They interview some of the musicians.
Oh, nice.
And I know 2 people that are performing that I went to college with. So anyway, doing something like that is going to be really inspiring. You
That's
can
cool.
imagine that's way up my alley. I can't find anybody to go with me though. Yeah.
I know someone in
Quite sure what
Ohio that
that
would go with
says.
you.
That,
I know someone in Ohio that would go with you.
oh God, I didn't even think of that. But then I was also thinking, it's do I really want to share my cabin? You know how small those cabins are.
Oh, they can be, yeah. And it's hard to sleep sometimes when you're just moving the
Well,
whole time.
yeah, and
I
what if I'm
played
having
on a lot of those.
what if I have to throw up 3 times? It would just suck for the other person. Or what if they're throwing up? Well, what if they had the shits? We definitely keep that in thought.
So I thought you were saying you do this all the time. You haven't gone on one yet.
I've never done it. No, but
Oh,
yeah, we'll
you're thinking
see.
about it.
It's super expensive when you go alone because nobody's sharing.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and-
No, it
But
sounds like the thing to do. Like,
eh,
yeah, a bunch of years ago, I went to mix with the masters, and it was a thing in France where it was a week-long recording intensive, and it was cool.
oh wow.
Yeah, and got
Uh-huh.
partial grant for it and travel money and stuff from Berkeley. So yeah, that was great. But like continued learning, like you said, there's always so much more to learn.
Right. Just look up another recording. There's a thing. There's just yeah, I've been really inspired by Jerry Allen's work recently and been
Mm.
studying, um, doing some transcription of hers, and I've been studying some music that Joanne Burkeen wrote,
Oh,
and
sweet.
just the rhythms and the harmonies are like crazy.
Wow.
And I just find it so interesting. And I this one piece is really intricate, and I asked her to if it would be okay for her to send me the music to it. And
Mm.
she took pictures of it and sent it along, and I've been working on it. It's like, wow, okay. I sound so I mean, I knew it was gonna be hard, but it's harder than I thought.
Oh, yeah, always. Well,
Always.
in a good way, because then that extra stretching happens. Like I remember even being a kid and practicing things for the first time, but liking that brain crunching feeling of working something out. very
Mhm,
often, whether it's guitar or piano, my hands or wrists are tired, but my brain wants to keep going. It's
mhm,
like I have to rest,
mhm,
but I'm still thinking about it in my head. And
mhm,
sometimes in bed, even as I'm falling asleep, I'm working on composite rhythms on the drums, and each of my four limbs are thinking about what they're doing so that you can separate your limbs and,
mhm,
have the
mhm.
independence and stuff. Did you see I'm looking forward to watching the special on Prime with about Wayne Shorter.
Oh, that's right. When's that gonna be?
I think it's now. I think we can watch it anytime. It looks good. The trailer looks great.
What's it called?
What's it called? Um, I
I'm
just
sure if I just say Wayne, and it's on Prime?
yeah,
It's all right, I'll find it.
yeah. It's just called Wayne Shorter Zero Gravity.
Mhm. Well, that'll be neat.
Yeah, can't wait. Well, I just watched a whole thing on Ella a couple of months ago, and that was fascinating too. I mean,
Mhm,
I had no idea the stuff that she went through and how she really wanted to be a dancer.
mhm. Really? I didn't know that.
Oh
Huh.
yeah, watch that special. That was great too. Jeez.
Was that one on Prime too?
Or one of them, Netflix or Prime. I don't know, get them all mixed up.
Uh,
Sometimes
I
I just
think it does.
join whatever the thing is just to watch the thing and then let that month roll out and
Uh-huh. Thing is you gotta remember to cancel.
exactly. That's what they want you to do is forget. Yeah. Now, what tune of yours can we play on the closing credits? Sophisticated Lady?
Oh, that would be perfect.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that. And like what are some of the things that you love about being a musician? Like for the longest time, up until maybe just a couple of months ago, I was saying, I want to be a musician in my next life too.
Well, you're never alone, and we both live alone, but we're never alone because instruments right there. I
That's
sit
pretty
with
great.
it, I spend my time with it, and, you
It's
know,
the best friend I've ever had, actually.
it
Yeah.
really is, and you're working on something, and you're getting better at something, and you're having successes daily, and what was hard yesterday is less hard today, and
Mm-hmm.
process, I just find that, well, I think it is exhilarating, yeah.
Mm.
In just I mean, living in sound and rhythm is just a joy.
It really is cool.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes even just a couple of chords, I could just live inside those chords
Mhm.
and hear them forever and be totally zen, totally happy or something.
It's funny because, you know, because we taught that's what we call a real musician, you know? So you get the students at school, and sometimes if I describe somebody, this is a real musician.
Hmm.
I'll even say to people, a student, if I find that that's true, to say it in a way, not in a way that, I thought you wouldn't be, but, now now you got the muse. I see you got the muse, don't you? All right. Now the rest of it is just wiggling, you're learning how to wiggle your fingers.
Yeah, yeah. Or
Unfortunately, no small task.
yeah, yeah, and all those things are different.
Mm.
Uh, there's so many ways to be a really great entertainer
Mhm.
that isn't necessarily a musician, but it's a great entertainer. Or some folks write, or some folks just play, or some folks improvise, and some folks make up stories, or like whatever you're doing. But it's interesting now too how so many things are becoming self-service, and that the musician has to do a million different jobs, whereas before it was optional, and people would laugh and say to me, why are you wearing so many different hats? Why
Mhm.
are you doing so many different things? You should just get an engineer. You should just get a publisher. You should just get a this. You should stop trying to be all those things. But now they're making you be all those things, like pump
Mhm.
your own gas. There's no self-serve. There's all self-service now for everything, pretty much.
When I go to Stop and Shop, I have to wring myself out.
Yeah, there's that now too.
Mm.
And I just saw the latest update on that at Whole Foods. They have carts now where you ring yourself in the cart and then you just take it out to your car. You've paid right from your cart.
God forbid any human contact. Mm,
You know what I wanted to ask you about piano is it's become much easier now. I have like a little Android phone and an app on there that I got for free that
mhm,
I can tune my piano with.
mm.
In 2 or 3 hours, I just tune my piano all the time. So I was wondering how often you have to have yours tuned, and if any teacher ever mentions, like, I think it should be part of piano training where they teach you how to at least fix your unison so you don't go crazy.
Interesting. Nobody's ever suggested I learn how to tune them in
I
my
know
whole life.
I don't think anybody wants to be anywhere near that, but I think it would be so helpful
Yeah, it
because
would be, it
you
would
guys
be.
are at the mercy of every piano that you come across in whatever condition it's in.
Yeah, I mean, I do know some pianists who know enough to make it a little better on them if they
Yeah.
get to a gig. I know nothing. Um, I remember a long time ago, I would ask, somebody to come in and check out the piano before I played on it, if it was like a at the Willow or something remember the Willow, like, the piano was terrible, but if when she tuned it up a little bit, at least it was playable, you know?
Yeah.
And she'd do that for half price, and then I'd do something for her, so,
Nice.
but my own piano is only 2 to 3 times a year. It keeps its tuning very well. It's got the damn chaser system on it,
Cool.
and I'll be, the guy's coming next Saturday, actually, so kinda
That's great.
wonky right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely one of those added skills that not everybody would be interested in doing, but like some of my friends, like Kate, play harp. She's tuning anyway. It's the same kind of tuner
So
thing.
does she do her piano?
Not yet. But I'm always saying you could. I mean, if I do mine and I don't even play piano or tune piano, so anybody can do it, you know?
Hmm,
Because it does the stretch tuning. You know, you just put it in a certain mode, you teach it what your piano is, and then you
mm,
save it. And then you can, it even switches, it knows A0, A1, A2. You can tell what octave you're in and what note you're playing if it doesn't do it automatically. And
mhm,
then you just mute or hold the other two strings when you're hitting one of the three or two of the, and you could do those two by ear if you want to, but the tuner just tells you when it's there. And you
mm,
just tune all three, tune all two, tune the ones, and you're good. It takes me about 2 or 3 hours, but like sometimes mine doesn't go out of tune everywhere. You just hear one that gets really sour or whatever. Go in, fix it, make sure it didn't drift too far from standard so I can record with it, touch it up. It's usually the center and the
mm.
ends are okay, like so.
That's where we play so much,
Yeah,
so
yeah. So yeah, I think it's cool, and I think it's a definitely an added benefit because I can't even hit my drums if they're not in tune. It just drives me crazy. That's why recording is so much cooler to me sometimes, is because I can control so many things.
well, great to see you.
Great to see you too, Suze.
Alright, talk real soon, okay?
Ciao. Thank you
Bye.
so much.
You're welcome, bye-bye.
Bye.